Now, imagine if you could treat post-traumatic stress disorder with a wave of a finger. Well, that's exactly what proponents of a relatively unknown therapy called EMDR, or eye movement desensitising and reprocessing, claim. The technique utilises eye movements similar to those in slow-wave sleep to help patients better cope with trauma. And as Lauren Day discovered, there's a growing call for people like paramedics to have more access to it.
Just allowing your eyes to follow and just notice. People often react with great scepticism when you say what's going to be going on here. But at the end of the day, people who have struggled with trauma will try anything at the end because it's not easy living with intrusive flashbacks and nightmares and that sort of stuff. So even though people are sceptical, it still works.
Amanda Devine is trying to overcome the most traumatic event of her life.
Now, Amanda, is there a particular memory or image that comes to mind that captures the essence of it?
The one I still struggle with is a picture in my mind of Bill when they found his body and that he was laid out in the morgue on the ship. That's the year that he also turned 50, so I think 50 was a big...
Amanda lost her husband Bill to suicide while on a family cruise ship holiday in 2013.
The day before he died.
He'd worked as an ambulance officer for 20 years, dealing with trauma, grief and threats to his personal safety. His family watched those experiences gradually take a toll on a man they say loved life.
He did change. He became more escalated. He became easily upset and overwhelmed at times by just what was happening in society, I think, and the jobs that he was having to attend.
Ultimately, the stress became too much.
I never really ever thought, and I'd never ever got any information from St John's or anywhere else, that suicide was a possible outcome from, and is higher in emergency medical first responders. And I'd never thought he would do something like that.
So just keeping that memory in mind and the thoughts you have about yourself for having missed it and that feeling in your gut. Just allowing your eyes to follow and just notice. Just observing. What do you notice now?
Yeah, just sort of give me a sense of relief and release.
After her husband's suicide, a trauma counsellor recommended Amanda Devine try EMDR. It took about 4 sessions, but eventually she found some much-needed relief.
It somehow sort of allows you to process that pain and then learn from it. And then by learning from it, you can store it away and bring it up again later when you need to.
So, Graham, you start the therapy by asking people to bring up their memory?
Yeah, we actually get them to focus on the content of a memory that's been distressing for them, the thoughts they have about themselves around that, and the emotions that they feel when they connect with that. We then add the eye movement component. So here's the eyes moving backwards and forwards. That causes pathways to start connecting between the emotional part of the brain and the part of the brain that can think more usefully. At the end of the day, what we get is this. The memory becomes more distant. It's no longer like in your face, but it's a faraway memory. The distress diminishes, and a person can think about themselves more adaptively rather than having the old thoughts associated with the trauma.
EMDR was developed in the 1980s and was initially controversial among psychologists due to a lack of evidence. After dozens of psychological studies showing its effectiveness and an endorsement by the World Health Organization in 2013, the treatment has gained popularity, particularly among professions which regularly deal with trauma. Lynn Sinclair is a former ambulance officer who now runs a support group for the growing number of first responders dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder.
We feel there's a bit of an epidemic in the emergency services where there is a huge need for more help and support.
She believes EMDR could be part of the solution.
Overseas, it's widely used, it's widely accepted. It's obviously something fairly new, and I guess some might see it as a little bit radical, but it's in reality a non-invasive therapy, and we've seen great results.
Sit down. Sit.
Janine Humphrey is another former paramedic who's struggled with the trauma of the job.
One I recall the most was a rape case. It was a very traumatic job to attend, I guess, and that was one that affected me a fair bit later on. That was when I started to notice I was having what you consider PTSD symptoms.
Good boy, heel.
Janine was also recommended EMDR therapy by a psychologist. She was surprised by the result.
It was really interesting because I walked in there really very jaded, I suppose, about the whole process and thinking, not sure this is going to work, this is all quackery, this is ridiculous. But I distinctly remember that memory kind of being dragged down a passageway or down a tunnel away from me. And it was the strangest feeling. And immediately after, I felt a sense of relief.
While proponents are pushing for the unconventional therapy to become more widely available, there are a limited number of psychologists trained to practice it because it's not part of a regular psychology degree.
If people had access to this sort of therapy, it would significantly reduce the incidence of PTSD. You could deal with those traumas, as they occur, and you wouldn't get that accumulation that leads to significant mental.
My son wants to be a paramedic, but he wants to go into the Navy and become a...
Amanda Devine is grateful for the relief the therapy has given her. She only wishes her husband had known about it.
What difference do you think EMDR might have made to Bill if he had had access to it?
Well, he might still be here. Instead of having what he always told me was a tape recorder running through his head.